Why is feminism and the social justice movement more widely, including the various critical X studies, so obsessed with abortion? Like it is a sacred thing that must never be interrupted, and any questioning of abortion is just men trying to force women barefooted back into the baby mills and the sandwich mines. The answer is unsurprisingly theological in origin, given feminism's spiritual origins. To this end, do I believe that all the people crusading for abortion rights are doing so for religious reasons? No. They are the 99% who don't know what feminism is in its history, they haven't read their books or studies, they have only been told the revisionist view of history from their women's studies or gender studies professors, or they learned these things from people who have been educated as such, radiating out via social media. This may sound unfair to the neophytes of the faith, but I assure you I bring numerous receipts demonstrating the truth of this position in the form of a variety of academic books, many written by feminist scholars, and used as references in women's studies and gender studies courses at the university level. These will be referenced at the end of the video. There will also be links to other videos and live streams in which I go through or discuss these books in great depth. So, once again, I have the extensive evidence backing all of this up for people who simply do not want to believe this is true about feminism. Probably because it is a belief system they hold near and dear to their heart. I fully understand that observations of spiritualism in what you may consider to be a secular movement may seem ridiculous. But I encourage you not to hand-wave this and to approach it with honest, open inquiry. After all, if a movement is correct and has all of the answers, as feminism surely does, then such a movement and its adherents do not mind being questioned, so that they might be able to answer such inquiries and share their wisdom and correct knowledge on the topic. So why is abortion a sacred religious right to feminism? To understand this, we must go back to the religious origin of the feminist and women's rights movement. This would be the branch of Christianity known as Gnosticism, considered by some to be one of the Christian heresies. However, this does not make it not Christian. This Gnostic origin would radiate out into society via spiritual movements, such as spiritualism, Hermetica, Theosophy, and later on, New Ageism, and eventually merge into areas of Christianity, such as the Quakers, Transcendentalists, and Universalists. What is this origin point? Simply put, the origin can be found in the Gnostic concept of the world as a carceral construct created by a fallen god or angel to trap the souls of humanity away from God, the monad, the oversoul, Gaia, however you wish to phrase it in whatever modern incarnation this religion takes form. This leaves humanity in a position of being away from this central source, which is undesirable. As such, the onus falls to the human to acquire gnosis, acquire knowledge, break on through to the other side, and ascend or transcend to a higher plane of being. This can be done via understanding of the world and its true nature away from God, and the upping of vibrational frequency, something that is covered extensively in Helena Blavatsky's writing. She is the woman who created Theosophy, and is also covered in the Hermetic principle of vibration. This is why New Agers constantly talk about vibrations and upping their vibrational frequency. It is a means of transcendence. This is also the origin point of where you get the modern term vibe from, to have a vibe about something or to vibe with something. How and why is this tied to abortion? Going back a few centuries, there was a belief, partly from Calvinism, but can also be found in other Christian denominations, though many will in modern times attempt to deny this, that the unbaptized or non-Christian would go to hell for non-belief. This caused upset, especially to women who lost children during childbirth, or shortly thereafter as infants who had not been baptized. There was somewhat a natural pushback to this in the form of spiritualism, which alleged that via mediums people could talk to the dead. Certain branches of Christianity picked up on this medium game and actually allowed it, suggesting that it was not in conflict with Christian dogma. This is because there are cases in certain translations of the Bible of people communicating with the dead, or with spirits, and in some cases even angels falling under this communication with something from beyond umbrella. This altered views of death and the afterlife in the cultural zeitgeist. Death was no longer the end, nor even a cut-off point. It was a rebirth, a call from God to come home, as defined by spiritualist Andrew Jackson Davis and others of his ilk. During this time, there was also an interesting shift in death rites in Europe and America concerning the conduct with the dead and burial. Cemeteries evolved into a more open plan and middle-class affair, reflecting the life of the increasingly suburban lifestyles of the up-and-coming. Larger plots for graves and mourners, more areas and graveyards for quiet sitting and contemplation. Death was no longer the end. This also combined with a fascinating change in temperament at the time, with people moving from village life to suburban and urban environs, which, ironically, despite more people being around, led to a greater sense of isolation. This moved mourning and death away from a village communal event to a private home sphere event. In other words, into the domain of the female. It is no coincidence that at this time, funeral rites and undertaking saw an explosion in consumerism regarding extravagancies of display of mourning, overtly elaborate flower displays, mourning gowns, increasingly elaborate caskets, etc., but that's another topic for another time. With this uptick of death becoming increasingly personal, combined with not being the end, combined with the notion that this world is a prison for the soul created by a deity or fallen angel to torment the souls of man, this combined with a few final elements, the first of which can be found in the writings of the likes of Marcuse concerning the nature of man. There are two fundamental views of man as related to nature and society. The first is that society and civilization have a civilizing effect on people. It takes the imperfect, sinful animal that is man and makes him better, bringing him closer to goodness, virtue, morality, and God, if you are so inclined to think that way. The counter to this, as is found in Marcuse and other Hegelian and later Marxist thinkers, is the opposite view, that this world is sinful and corrupting. It takes a fundamentally good and noble savage animal and corrupts it into something more sinful and evil. This is why several thinkers of these traditions advocate for such extreme social reform, to the point of outright destruction. This leads us to one of the key spiritualist beliefs, which falls into the latter of those two views of society. Most crucially, that the young, babies especially, are more free of sin than adults, because they have not been exposed to the corrupting, sinful nature of society, a view which was popular with Puritans at the time, hence spiritualism rebelling against that tradition. As such, if a baby dies in the womb, at birth or shortly thereafter, well, of course that child is now in heaven with God, and thanks to spiritualist mediums, we have all sorts of proof and stories of how wonderful heaven is, how the children grow up there, guided by other relatives of their family who have also passed on. They learn to read and write. They tell you not to mourn them because they are happy in heaven with God and their relatives, in some cases even living in their own beautiful houses, surrounded by flowing fields of gold. It is no coincidence that these spirit stories mirror a nostalgia-based harken back to the, at the time, idealized and romanticized rural lifestyle held by the middle class of the era, increasingly moving into more built-up areas. It is also no coincidence that with the spiritual belief of these proto-feminists replacing sin and death, they would also allow the unborn to look down upon their mothers with superhuman understanding, love, and forgiveness. In doing so, the spiritualist proto-feminist's now deceased child would replace Christ himself. This was the final step in the deification of the female and feminine. This was finalized with women being expected to be the spiritual center of the home, as they oversaw not only the death rites of their children, but also the birth of their children, the new Christ figures, the rejection of Calvinist views moving women away from being the fallen temptress of Eve leading men to sin, instead as the morally, spiritually pure who would inculcate true piety into their children. In this new, holy, sacred, modern, liberal Christian home, the woman would also be expected to purify her husband from his terrible sins acquired while outside the home in the larger, corrupting, sinful world. In this new era of Christian home life, women became God, and her unborn or recently dead children became as Christ, filling her with superhuman forgiveness for her sins and loving her regardless from the new beyond after death. Look no further for proof of this than feminists' own writing. Schaef, 1982, in Women's Reality, literally describes how women are oppressed by their children, because their children provide purpose and moor them to the material world, the straight white male system world, full of social constructs created by men to prevent the rise of the theological female system, in which there is no objective reality. Everything is a living, ongoing process which, if unfettered by white male system oppressive influence, would allow that free-flowing exchange of energy and vibration from solar plexus to solar plexus, allowing women to fill their void of female sin, created by males to make them feel incomplete and inferior. And in filling their void of female sin, women could truly engage in process never-ending, to uncover the real her story of the world, up their vibrational frequencies, and transcend, to take back into themselves the essence of God, the Oversoul, Gaia, etc. Once again, I remind you I am quoting here from a women's studies text that is used at the university level and can be found as required reading on women's studies and gender studies courses. If you take all these points together, you realize the true spiritual origins of abortion and how it has shaped the feminist rhetoric of the day. Abortion is a religious act, freeing women of material connection, turning their children from their born oppressor into their unborn savior, while the mothers themselves become the savior of the unborn child, protecting it from the pseudo-hell that is the carceral construct of this material plane of existence, taking that pure unborn soul and allowing it to escape corruption and transcend directly to heaven. If you wanted to go even further into esoteric occultism, there are branches of spiritualism that combine esoteric Christianity and Jewish Kabbalah that would indicate the Levantine god Yahweh as being the demiurge that created this world, and Yahweh sharing roots with the Canaanite god Moloch, whose name roots from the Punic language Moloch meaning sacrifice. Through slightly convoluted means, this could, hypothetically, if you really wanted to reach, indicate that abortion, the killing of children, could be a dedication to this god associated with child sacrifice. That last part is presented tongue-in-cheek. I don't actually think that you would be able to pin the broader feminist movement to the position that they push abortion as a means of feeding baby souls to Moloch. Nor do I actually believe that many could be pinned to abortion being a means of saving children from incarceration on Earth as a means of transcending their souls to God in a sacrificial act that simultaneously saves the soul of the woman getting the abortion via their infant's own superhuman love, forgiveness, and happiness in the next world. The only reason I think modern feminists cannot be pinned to these positions is because, as I indicated at the beginning, 99% of them are neophytes of the faith, who have not read their own movement's literature, nor read the history of the movement, or where their ideas came from. They have just been indoctrinated with slogans like, "If you are not a feminist, you are a sexist," backed up with such reasoning as, "Feminism is when good things," which is coincidentally similar reasoning used by others in the Hegelian spiritualist tradition, such as Marxists and socialists. But proof that such people are not materialists as they claim to be is another topic for another time. If you would like more information on this topic of abortion as sacrosanct, and how and why I have uncovered this position, I recommend to you as a starting point the books Women's Reality by Ann Wilson Schaef, Radical Spirits by Anne Browd, Hegel and the Hermetic Tradition by Glenn McGee, Science, Politics and Gnosticism by Eric Vogelin, and The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. If that last one is a little heavy, you could substitute The Feminine Occult, which is a collection of 18 essays from Helena Blavatsky, Annie Besant, Florence Farr, and others, detailing their views on spiritualism, mysticism, Kabbalah, Hermetica, Theosophy, etc. All the things that kick-started the feminist religion.